Hello, my name is Fontella. Welcome to the first episode of Functional Health and Wellness. In this pilot episode, I will share part of my personal health journey from the point where I was diagnosed with MS to ultimately creating a healthier alternative lifestyle, all of which has set me on the path to improve the quality of my life by any means necessary. Moving forward, my goal is to share a variety of wellness topics that will hopefully improve the quality of your lives. I was diagnosed, with MS. My doctor came in literally like she was like bracing herself to tell me, and it was one of those things where she's like, "I'm sorry, but you have multiple sclerosis." So I'm like, okay, for me, I just at that time, like I was absolutely ignorant as to what that was. Like, had I known what I was in for, I probably would have cried, or I probably would have looked like she looked. She was more devastated than I was. My reaction was more like, well, so can you fix this? Like, is there anything you can do? And, they were just kind of like, well, we can put you on treatment, but you're going to have to do therapy, so on and so forth. So that's what they did. They treated me with steroids, like it was an aggressive course, but so I could get my sight back. And after that, I was just like going. I was always really independent, active. I was traveling, I was doing everything. So this was absolutely unacceptable that I was about to be suffering from this all the time. But I didn't think about it that way, because with speaking to the doctor, the average amount of time or number of flares you would have with MS is like every 4 years you would have, and that's not everyone, but that's the average. So for me to just come in right out the gate and be getting flares every single year, and some years multiple flares, it was absolutely outrageous. It was kind of like my MS went backwards. Like, it started from the most aggressive point and, eventually came to where I am now. So after dealing with that for a while, I can just skip like that bedridden wheelchair walking, that just repeat and rewind that for years until finally in 2009. In 2009, same thing, had a flare, hospitalized, hospital rehab, everything, the works. So finally I make it to, this is after I get out of the rehab and I go visit the doctor. Now we're gonna talk about, the plan moving forward, because I'll note I was taking medication religiously this entire time. I mean, from the second I was diagnosed, they were like, well, you should take this. I was taking intramuscular shots, subcutaneous, everything. I was taking daily shots. Then I went to 3 times a week. It was just, I was doing every single thing you could do. Towards the end, I was taking the shots along with IV steroids, which is actually horrible, because that's what they use when you have a flare. That's what's going to kind of halt the flare. So to be taking it as your regular medication is just outrageous. But they didn't know what else to do. And I feel like that at that time, there weren't the developments that they have now. I'm glad, but they didn't have those things. So basically 2009, I go to see my doctor, and we're talking about what to do now because nothing's working. And she was like, I think we should put you on chemo. So I was like, absolutely not. I wasn't even walking at that point. I was in the wheelchair at that time, and I still, I kind of feel like the times where my doctors would have these heavy conversations with me would be when I was really compromised. Like, it was never when I was walking and just, level-headed and I was kind of thinking clear. It was always when I was in some compromised position, and I went years just listening to whatever they said. It was like, you're the specialist, I don't know anything about this disease, so you know best. But really, that just wasn't the way to go. So 2009, I was, we were talking about chemo. I shouldn't even say we were talking about it, because I was not talking about it. I immediately shut it down, so especially considering when they use it to treat MS, like, that is your medication. It's not like when you have cancer or something and they use it for a while and they blast away a tumor and then it's like, okay, we can stop now, it's done. Like, no, that is your medication. So it was like 2 weeks you're taking something before, then you take it, then you have to take something 2 weeks after, because now you're just susceptible to everything, so no, I just, it was one of those moments that I can say literally was like the pivotal moment in my life that set me on this path, because I just no. Like I was really, I don't want to say stubborn, but I was stubborn. I'll just say that. I was just like, because what I did, I felt make sense and it made sense. And I feel like what she was proposing did not make sense for me. I was in my 20s and I was like, no, like I'm chemo, like now no. So that was off the table, and she basically wanted nothing to do with me because I wasn't going to do what she wanted me to do. So I took my little sheet that she had filled out so I could go to the, it's always, and then it's like the cancer terminal illness center. It's like, it just sounds horrible. Like that's where I'd be taking my medication. No. So she gave me the sheet. I just folded it, and I literally have that paper to this day. I never went. I just said, you know what, like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not doing that. So I left and I went home, and that was probably the longest 30 days of my life the next month, because I was just sitting there where I was like, okay, I need to start trying to walk again and, get better. But I was just off of medication and I didn't know what I was going to do. It was like a horrible period. Once I decided I wasn't going to take chemo, I said, literally, there was just this period of nothingness. I mean, like I like to think that I know everything all the time. At least that's how I was. But I had no idea what I was going to do. So I just was at a standstill, like stagnant. I wasn't thinking about what I was going to do. I wasn't, just nothing. I wasn't doing anything. And so it did what it does to people. It just got me really depressed. But I was in a wheelchair. I wasn't walking yet. So I just kind of shifted my focus to walking. Like I had to start walking. So I'm like, all right, whatever I'm going to do, I got to start walking, and that's it. And that's kind of what I did. So I got myself to the point where I, with therapies and everything else, so I was walking, and now I just went like crazy with the research again, just like child me. So I went crazy with the research. I'm like, what? Now I started really looking into the disease, because as much as I like to think that from the time I was diagnosed, I looked up everything about MS, and I knew everything about it. Like I did not, I still had a really minimal understanding of the disease. It kind of extended just past what the doctors told me, and they really didn't have any idea. I mean, I think even today they don't have, they just don't know enough about it. But it was a situation where I looked at everything they told me to do, everything they told me not to do, and I just totally changed it up. So my diet was already, I didn't have a bad diet, but I just further refined it, where I was like, okay, like I'm vegetarian, but I'm like, okay, I need to look at this vegan diet. I have to go that way. I just fine-tuned it with sugar. I looked at what was really happening in the body regarding inflammation and what I could do to reduce that. So I had to now change to somewhat of an anti-inflammatory diet. I started looking at what happens in the body with MS. Like, why would my immune system attack my nervous system? Like, why would that happen? And what can I do to prevent it? What am I doing that's probably, like inciting these flares or whatever the case is? So it was just a long period of searching. So I looked at the medications that I was taking, and I knew I wasn't going to take any more of that. So I was like, I'm done with these shots. Like, what can I do to soothe? I think it almost started with me soothing symptoms, in a sense, like soothing symptoms with herbal medicine. So I started doing heavy research. There were certain things I was already familiar with, but I started really digging in. So I'm kind of, like, okay, this herb does this category, this is this. It was trial and error. There were some things that I wish I didn't take, but it was one of those where that's what I had to do to find out what was going to work. And I listened to my body, because I think over the years, I did not listen to my body. I just listened to my doctor. That's what I did. Like they said, you should do this. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And it was like, regardless of how it made me feel, I did it because I thought that was the best thing at the time. So once I got past that stage, I started, now I should say at that time with MS, the doctors, they didn't discourage exercising, but they explained to you that, like, you exercising, you could incite a flare, you can further exacerbate anything that's going on in your body. So you were encouraged not to really doing anything. So it was one of those things where I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start working out now, because I would do little things here and there, but now I'm really going to start working out, because one of my biggest symptoms with my MS was fatigue. So the only way that I knew how I felt after I worked out, you know. And even though at the time when I was doing it, I would, you know, initially I was regretting it because I'm like, oh, great, I'm going to pay for this. But no, it kind of, you know, I had to learn to modify the way I worked out, basically. So I started lifting weights. I started, you know, but at that time it was at an amateur level. So I started lifting weights, and I was speaking to another specialist that I have, and they were kind of like, oh, well, you should go swimming. So I'm like, well, yeah, that's, you know, swimming's great. The bad news was I couldn't swim. So I was like, oh, great, here we go. You know, like that would be perfect. That's why it would be perfect because I don't know how to do it. So I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. I called to hire someone so they could teach me how to swim. And yep, because I'm like, if anything, I don't want to go to your pool party. I don't want to do any of that. I just want to swim laps. I want to swim for fitness, like to get better, and that's it. So yep, I literally hired somebody, and I told her, I don't care about any of those strokes. I don't want to fun swim. I just want to learn how to swim laps. And she was like, okay. So yeah, to this day I swim laps. Don't invite me to your pool party because I'll be swimming laps. And you know, and everybody's like, what is she doing? Yeah, I'll be swimming laps. That's what I'll be doing. So yeah, I wanted to dedicate that only to healing myself, and I didn't want to have fun with it. But yeah, so I started swimming, lifting weights, kind of like I said, in an amateur way. And then the job that I was working at the time, one of my coworkers was actually like, oh, you know, you should do CrossFit. Because it was kind of like when I started working out, I was off and running. So you know, my body takes well to when I'm working out. So I started working out, and, you know, you could tell, and I had started walking, and I wanted to maintain that. So I was like, I need to keep, you know, I need to squat my little, you know, whatever off because I need to keep walking. So she's like, you know, we'll come down. So long story short, I went down to the CrossFit with her that she was going to, and I was like, I instantly fell in love. Like this was right up my alley of needing to train, but not train too long, you know, shorter period of time, more intense, and be done with it, and you get the results. So I'm like, perfect, you know, efficiency. I was like, this is what I need. So I pretty much did that for, I think, about 5 years. I can't remember, probably about 5 years. 5 years I did CrossFit, and then in between I started powerlifting. So I got a trainer. It's a really great trainer. So I got a trainer, and I started powerlifting, and then that was like, so then now that I'm in love with CrossFit, I was kind of like, I really more appreciate the lifting of CrossFit. So now I'm leaning more towards powerlifting, and I started competing with that, and I was doing awesome. Like I was like, whatever I do, I just need to be good at it. That's, you know, if it's helping me, you know, forget about it. So I was doing CrossFit, I was powerlifting, pretty much doing everything. So another coworker, clearly my coworkers are like really monumental in my life here, but another coworker had come to me because he saw like I was really active. So he's like, hey, you know, you should do this bike ride. And, you know, so I was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, you know, sure, let's do it. So mind you, I say, okay, I really have no idea. First of all, I don't have a bike. That was A. So I didn't have a bike. Couldn't even tell you last time I was on a bike. And I didn't ask any details about this ride. So later I found out that it was a 150-mile ride, which is, you know, significant for someone who doesn't ride a bike. But yeah, so I was kind of like, yeah, let's do it. Who cares? So I sign up, I do, you know, whatever, I do everything. And granted, there's a gap. He did have to kind of keep talking me into it. Like I just kept blowing him off, but I agreed and I signed up. So I did the race. And this race, the reason he asked me was because this race was actually for MS. So I think that was more like, how do you say no? You know, like how can I say no? So it was for MS, and it was for the people putting it on was the MS Society, and they were like really monumental. Like they helped me a lot, like when I was hospitalized, and, you know, so they were there like for advocacy. You could just call them and they could, you know, they would help you with a lot of things. So from 2009, when I was like, nope, to chemo, and I'm not taking anything, like that's it, now we're going. So in that time, mind you, every year before that, I had more flares than the number of years. I was having multiple flares, within a year. So I forget about that. 2009, after I said, no more, we're not doing it. The following year, 2010, I had another flare, partial. I lost the left side of my body. Then 2011, I had another one, but it was milder, and I was able to, I could feel it coming. I was able to catch it, and again, so we went through the same course. But 2012, nothing. 2013, I somewhat had a flare, but it was my fault. So, and I know that's weird. So we'll get into my fault. Some of these flares can be your fault. That was my fault, and that was because, these were my CrossFit years, and we went to the CrossFit Games that year, and it was amazing, of course, but you're in the heat for like 10 hours a day, you're in California heat, which I had never been to and had never felt that heat like that. That was something else. That was like, I've been to the hottest countries in the world, but California heat's something else. And it literally increases like 30 degrees, like in the drop of a hat. You don't even realize it coming. So being out in the sun like that, it caused, I had a reaction to it basically. So it was still manageable. I wouldn't even say that it was a flare like the ones that I'd had in the previous years, but it was still a flare. But it made me pay attention to my behavior, like what I was doing. I wasn't Superwoman. I wasn't invincible. Like, you still can't do these things. Like, there's work you need to do in order to maintain this. So I learned from that, and that was fine. 2014, I ended up having. So now we're like going, we're like trailing on the negligence train, I like to call it. So once I'm negligent, it all goes downhill from there. So 2014, I ended up having a triplet. So I still feel like I'm in a good place, because I'm like, okay, we're not bedridden in the hospital. We're not in a wheelchair. We're none of that. We're not doing that anymore. But we're still having flares. So 2014, I had this triplet of just this triplet of events. And what my doctor ended up explaining to me at the time is that with MS, you can have any autoimmune condition manifest as a flare, but you don't actually have that condition. So I ended up getting cellulitis on my shin here, and it was odd because it was like raised, it was red, and it was just spreading, but there was no fluid, there was not, because it's like mimicking it. There isn't any actual bacterial infections, there's nothing like that. So you can't, I went to the doctor and they're like, oh, we have this antibiotic. And I'm like, to the antibiotic, I'm like, no, that's nope. So I had gone to an urgent care doctor because at the time I was like, well, that doesn't have anything to do with my neurologist. I went to urgent care, gave me the antibiotic. I just nope. So I called my neurologist and I'm like, hey, this is going on. And he explained to me what that, what was happening. Like, this can happen, X, Y, and Z. So I'm like, okay, well, what can I do? Because I don't want to take this antibiotic. And he was all about that. So he told me that I could just, use some wound care, basically just clean it up and it'll start shrinking and keep it clean, and that's it. So that's what we did, and it faded. Flares with MS is more about like, hurry up and wait, So you just, even when you take a course of steroids, yeah, it'll halt like the progression of it, but it doesn't tell you when you're going to be out of the flare. You just kind of have to wait. So there was that, and then immediately after, I had a flare of alopecia, which literally this whole if you just took a whole chunk like this out of my head, whole chunk of my hair just fell out. So I'm absolutely devastated, because at this point I'm all about like my curls. I'm all curling my hair every day. I'm just like, my hair just wasn't what it was. So I'm like, so I lose that whole section. I don't even know what to think. Of course, I don't think, let me call my neurologist. My hair just fell out. It's just like you don't. So, but I did anyway. So eventually I called him and I'm like, I don't know if because it was really close to like what just happened, and I was also just listening to my body, knowing that things were different. And, I spoke to him and he's like, yeah. So of course he told me like, yep, oh, you have, it's just a flare. So it kind of acts like whatever, but whatever, you don't have that. You don't have alopecia. Like, your hair's not going to keep falling out. So I was like, okay. So that was that. So then this is all like a month apart, these things are happening. So then I get a flare of vertigo, which I had never had, and that was not amazing. So I literally that time got it. I've had it again since, but that time I was at work, sitting in my chair, just, working, minding my own business, and I literally started like air surfing. I couldn't even, it was like I was sitting, I wasn't standing, and I couldn't even sit in the chair. Like it was insane. It was insane. And the thing is when you have like vertigo symptoms with MS, you can't, like it's not ocular, so you can't take any medication for it that's gonna like help. This is like nothing. It's again, you just hurry up and wait for it to pass, and there's nothing you can do. They're like, and you just, I don't know, you just wait. So that was pretty horrible. But yeah, so that was that, that little period there. So now I'm kind of like, okay, just get it together, Fontella, because you were doing good, and then whatever you were doing, you started messing up, and now you're going downhill. And it's one of those things where if you don't get your flares under control, or you don't get, if you're not on top of it when it's happening, it will keep going, and it will travel. It just can be horrible, So now I'm like, okay, get it together, get things back to whatever. So I'm doing that. I'm going back to working out. Blah blah blah. I literally turned my house into a gym. Like I had everywhere. I know you're thinking like, not everywhere. No, everywhere. Like I had, not the bathroom, but other than that, at the bathroom, and then I had one room, which was like my room, and that was it. Everything else turned into a gym. There were mats everywhere, because there was going to be no excuse as to why I couldn't work out. It was like, can't go to the gym, that's fine. Just go to the living room. That's it. Like go over there. So I did that for a while, and that pretty much, I was like, okay, this is what I need to do to maintain. Around that time, a little after, I also started doing cryotherapy, which has been huge in my life. So I still do cryotherapy 2 times a week. That's just what I do. So cryotherapy, compression therapy, and it was just like every 2. So now this is a part of my regular, routine, and it's great. It helps me immensely. Like it helps me with my fatigue. It helps me with a lot with my MS. Everybody has different symptoms with their MS, but I'm like, okay, this is what's helping me. I need to keep doing it, but it's costly. Like insurance they don't recognize that. They're like, no, like you could be taking this shot here and you don't want to, so suit yourself. So so it's like, that's what I had to do, but whatever, that's it. I'm kind of like, it's working, so I don't want to change that. And the weird thing is, my MS totally shifted my entire life, and in a way that I don't spend my money the way other people spend their money. Like I just don't, I mean, I buy shoes, like but other than that, like I'm not like going out and doing those things where you spend, like I'm not about that life, because I have to spend hundreds of dollars a month, just alone in cryotherapy, like that, and then vitamins, that's another hundreds of dollars, like, and this is per month, like it's just, I don't know. It's a lot of money, but it's like, that's what I have to do. The price I pay when I'm down is like not even worth, trying to skimp out and save and not buy what I know I need, So it's like, once I knew, that's just what it needed to be. I always like rented a wheelchair. I like buying one was not, I was super in denial, So I was just like, why, this is just this year. It's not going to be whatever. But then it was year after year after year. So I actually had one of my doctors tell me, like, Fontella, like, you need to buy a wheelchair. Like, this is gonna, like, he just was like, you are not going to walk, without some kind of device. Like, you're just not. Like, that is after, this wasn't even 2009, this was 2008. And he said, like, you're not, like, your level of debilitation is, it's really bad, and it's getting worse, and blah, 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 whatever. So, I was like, goodness. So now I'm just kind of like, he was right. I mean, like he was wrong sitting here today in 2020, but he was right that the way it was progressing was getting worse. So I ended up, I mean, now at that time, I ended up buying 2 wheelchairs, not even just one. So I'm like, okay, well, let me get, like, I have to, whatever I do, I was like, I'm gonna go all out. If this is gonna be my life and this chair, it's gonna be the best chair east of the Mississippi River. So I'm like, okay. So I get one chair, and clearly I didn't know how much they cost when I first started, like searching for them. But I get one chair, and I actually have the MS Society. They actually, someone years ago from the MS Society actually helped me with getting, financial assistance, I say, but it was really a loan. I had to pay it back. But so they helped me, get kind of like some financing for one of my chairs. So I was able to do that, and that was the first one that I had. And then I got another custom chair. So the first one was indoor, then I got an outdoor chair. So I had these 2 chairs, and I'm like, all right, this is it, then this is it, So I kind of did that, and I, like that, purchasing those wheelchairs really put me in the sunken place. That was kind of like, I just accepted that, like that made it real for me, I guess. So it was very real, but it made it even more real for me having to purchase those wheelchairs and be like, this is how I'm gonna get around, So with all of that being said, through all these years going through everything, the one thing that I realized that I think I kind of downplayed over the years was stress. And stress and not maintaining the things I needed to do, not maintaining myself, basically, like coming out of routine. I'll fast forward to last year. So last year was kind of a rough year for me. So it was really stressful, and I had a lot of things going on, and it was really weighing on my body. Like it started from last year where it put me on a cane, and I was just like, oh, okay, whatever. But me, I'm like, whatever. The cane, I can still do it. I can still do whatever I have to do, and I'm just gonna keep going. So it's kind of dragging where I wasn't getting better. That's the thing, and it's like, if I learned anything, I now in hindsight, I can think back how things got worse for me, and now I can think of what stressful situation was happening around that time. Like now I can like literally list it and pinpoint it. But so last year, it pretty much started from last year, but I was like getting myself back together. I'm like, okay, I need to, I ended up doing this intense workout routine with trainers, that I actually hired, and I did it like, this is what I need to get back because I have to get off this cane. So they were like, okay, let's do whatever. I went through that, and that was fine. I fast forward to this year. I'm working, but now the pandemic hits and we start working from home, okay? I promise this is relevant. So start working from home, and, the normal person would be like, ooh, this is great, I'm working from home. Not me, because I'm like, so I don't need to be sitting down at any time. I mean, right now, but like in life, I don't need to be just sitting down. I was the type of person that like, when I was working and I was in the office, I'm walking like every 15 minutes. Like that's just what I'm, I just have to keep things moving. So pandemic hits, I now will work from home. I'm like, fine, whatever. I'm just working and doing whatever. But I'm really realizing how much my routine meant to me, because now the gym is closed, cryo's closed, the whole facility. I can't do any of that stuff. I'm like, I can't, you just can't even go anywhere. There's like nothing, I wouldn't say there's nothing you can do. There were things you could do, but even working out at home, because now at this point I've moved, so I'm no longer in the house with the gym. Like when I tell you, like it just, upside down. So everything kind of changed, and it was like in a really short period of time. So I was already kind of stressful about my situation because I didn't have like the home gym and everything, but that was fine. And then when the pandemic hit, it was like, no, it's not. You can't go to the gym either. So I couldn't do that. And it was literally like week by week, I could start feeling the decline. Like I could feel the decline. I'm like, oh, no, and there are some things I probably should have done, at the time, but there weren't a lot of things accessible to me because of the situation. So I was pretty much carrying on, with life and doing whatever it is. And next thing you know, bam, this year, March, emergency room. I start losing my left side. So I'm in a flare. So it's funny because the way this flare, this flare allowed me to see like the growth that I've had just with this condition. So, and I know that seems weird because it's like, well, why'd you have a flare again? But no, I mean the growth in handling it, because that's the difference in how it went. This year was kind of like, okay, yep, that's a flare, all right, and then I'm like, can I drive? Can I not drive? Because I know I need to go to the emergency room, so I'm pretty much just like, what do you want to do? Like take a shower, just do, like whatever you want to do, like shave if you want to, do whatever, because you're not going anywhere. Like you're going to walk into the hospital and you're not walking out. So I'm kind of like, you just, in your mind, you prepare yourself for that and, whatever. I'm past that. So that doesn't really, that doesn't move me anymore. But, so it was, long story short, went to the hospital and they're like, yeah, like we're going to admit you. So I'm like, I'm like, I have to work tomorrow. And they're like, no, you you probably do, but you're no. So I'm like, okay, so, and it's funny because even as I was going, I ended up Ubering to the emergency room. But anyway, so as I was going, I'm like sending a message, I'm sending a message to my supervisor, like, hey, I think I'm having a flare. I'm just gonna go to the hospital real quick, and they probably want to do MRI. So after that, I'll probably be a little late. That's why I said I'll probably be a little late. Yeah, 3.5 months. So I'm like, okay, so that was that. I went to the hospital, whatever. They admitted me, and now it's just like, it's just getting worse. At this point, I know the difference between. So this was new activity. This flare was new activity, and I could tell because sometimes you have a flare, and you can have. Anything can aggravate like an existing lesion, on your brain, your spine. Like my brain and my spine literally looks like a sausage pizza. That's what it looks like. It's just like the lesions that are on it. So it's like, considering that, I'm pretty highly functioning. So it looks, my brain now looks worse than it looked when I was like confined to the bed when I couldn't, so make of that what you will. But so for me with that, what I'm doing is working. I knew it was a new flare, so I knew this was going to take long. I knew it was going to be worse, everything like that. But I think I was at peace with it because I knew why. I knew why I was having this flare. So with me being off of therapy, as soon as anything happens, they're like, oh, see, I told you, you should have been on these shots. You should have been taking this, And for me, I'm like, no. What I needed to do was not stress the way I was. I was doing a lot of things that, not on purpose, but the circumstance dictated that. So I was stressing. I was not keeping up with my regular maintenance, which I'd been doing for years, which was working. So it was like, for that to come to a halt, like when I think of things like that, like for me, it's like, it's life or death. Like that is for life. I will always have to do this type of maintenance because the second I stop, I'm going to pay for it. Like that's, that's just how it goes. And, that's the path I choose because I would like to have a better quality of life. But so either way, I go through the whole hospital, rehab, and then I'm back home doing outpatient. So I'm doing all of this to try and get myself back, and I'm back. But when you're in the hospital, they don't you're not ordering the regimen of herbs that I take, and they're not doing all that. Like you might get some vitamin D, some B12, you can do those, you'll get that stuff, but as for anything else, you're not. So even after coming out of that situation, it was like I was digging myself out of a hole I kind of got into. Like I definitely regressed. But yeah, no, I looked at this year as, the flare this year was definitely a lesson for me. It showed me how, every time I have a flare, I'm like, what could you have done different? How could you have prevented this? Because it's your job to prevent it. That's it. You're not taking anything. You can't blame the medication. It's you. So it's kind of like, what could you have done to prevent it? And all of these things that were out of commission at the time, how will you duplicate it? Because you can't be, I also can't be a slave to that, where if they lock, then now I'm going to have a flare again, so it allowed me to reevaluate and just kind of like strengthen up, my routine and just shore it up a little bit more. But it definitely taught me about my mental toughness, because that's a certain place to be when you're walking and you're fine and you're just like, you're doing whatever, and bam, now you're in the hospital. You can't even, you can't even wipe yourself. You can't take yourself to the bathroom. People are taking you. They're just, it's like a whole different, there's a whole entirely different experience. Like you like to, like I'm still young, so that's just, I shouldn't have to tell these tales. Like and I certainly shouldn't have to in 2020, but that's the thing. It's knowing that it's always a possibility. So you have to do what it is that you need to do to, to be preventative. And yeah, that's pretty much, that is the story of my life. Like everything, I learned something from every single thing.